picture this. It's the middle of the night, June 11th, 2026,
Right.
and there's this diplomatic aircraft just sitting completely idle on a dark runway in Tehran.
Yeah, just stranded there.
Exactly. Inside this plane, you have a team of Qatari diplomats who are, I mean, they're just completely exhausted. They've spent the entire night in these intense high-wire negotiations trying to stop a massive regional war from spiraling completely out of control.
Oh, yeah.
But while they're physically stuck on that tarmac, hoping they've somehow stitched together this fragile piece.
The other shoe drops.
Right. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is posting on social media. He's publicly declaring that the U.S. is going to hit Iran, quote, very hard tonight and take total control of its oil and gas industry.
It's just, I mean, it's a phenomenal display of modern geopolitical whiplash.
Oh, totally.
You have the exact people actively trying to stop the war, physically trapped on the runway of the country that is supposedly like hours away from a massive bombardment.
It's terrifying. And that single, incredibly tense runway moment, that's the focal point of our deep dive today. We're looking at the dizzying, the really high stakes 2026 ceasefire in the U.S.-Iran war.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We are piecing this runway scene and all the surrounding chaos together from this absolute mountain of highly sensitive reports. We're using comprehensive Wikipedia timelines to build the chronological backbone. We've got real-time tactical updates from JINSA, that's the Jewish Institute for National Security of America.
Right, which are crucial.
Exactly. Plus, we're pulling behind-the-scenes diplomatic reporting from AP News, PBS, The New Arab, and even policy briefs straight from the European Parliament.
Which I gotta say is a vast array of intelligence to sift through.
Yeah.
Especially because the public statements from these different nations often completely contradict the actual reality on the ground.
Oh, entirely. It's a maze. And before we go any further, I do need to state something really clearly up front.
Yeah, important disclaimer here.
Right. Because we are dealing with intense actions from the Trump administration, military campaigns by the Israeli government, strict demands from the Iranian regime, and some heavily debated human rights controversies, we have to state this clearly. We aren't here to pick political sides.
Absolutely not.
We're not endorsing any of these actions or viewpoints. Our mission today is purely to show you the blueprints of how this incredibly fragile ceasefire was built, why it keeps buckling under the pressure, and what the mechanics of this conflict actually mean for your daily life.
We're just impartially reporting the facts and the perspectives exactly as they exist in the source material.
Exactly. So to really grasp the gravity of those diplomats sweating on the runway on June 11th, we have to look at the sheer scale of the crisis they were trying to solve, right?
Yeah, because the spark for this entire sequence actually ignited months earlier.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to rewind to February 2026.
Right. February of 2026. That was when a series of U.S. and Israeli airstrikes resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, along with several other high-ranking officials.
And the fallout from that assassination, I mean, it wasn't just a military escalation, it was an immediate attack on the global economy.
A massive shockwave.
Because Iran retaliated by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. And if you aren't super familiar with maritime trade routes, closing that strait is essentially grabbing the global economy by the throat.
It really is.
Roughly
a fifth of the entire world's oil supply flows through that specific, very narrow body of water.
Wow, a fifth.
Yeah. So by choking it off, Iran instantly triggered a regional war and just threw global supply chains into absolute chaos.
Right, which brings us right back to the urgency of that June 11th tarmac moment. Months of this economic and military strangulation had pushed the whole region to the absolute brink.
And the Qatari diplomats on that plane had been working back channels all night, desperately trying to construct some kind of off-ramp.
But, I mean, trying to construct a diplomatic off-ramp while leaders are publicly threatening massive airstrikes, it feels impossible.
Oh, it's wild.
It's not so much like defusing a bomb. It's more like trying to negotiate a highly complex fire insurance policy for a burning building while the insurance broker is actively standing outside throwing gasoline on the roof.
That is a very accurate analogy.
Right. And the AP reporting on this specific night reveals the lengths they had to go to because the Qatari emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, actually had to get on a secure line and directly call President Trump.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, that direct intervention is a testament to how fast the clock was running out.
Yeah.
The emir wasn't calling to discuss, long-term strategy. He was calling to beg For hours.
Literally just hours.
Literally. He urged Trump to hold off on the imminent military strikes, pleading that a tangible deal was merely hours away from being finalized.
And the sheer weight of that personal head of state to head of state connection, it actually worked. Trump canceled the strikes. That single phone call effectively saved the diplomatic process from being obliterated right there on the runway.
But, Trump canceling the strike on the runway brought them a few hours. It didn't solve the core logistical problem.
Which is that Washington and Tehran literally do not talk to each other.
Exactly. They don't have embassies in each other's capitals. They have no direct line.
Right. So to capitalize on those few precious hours, they needed a middleman, someone who could pick up the phone and be implicitly trusted by both the Oval Office and the Iranian regime at the exact same time.
And that diplomatic vacuum is how Pakistan suddenly became the most important country in the room.
Pakistan, right.
Yeah. Pakistan is really the unsung linchpin of this entire ceasefire apparatus. Geographically, they share a massive border with Iran, meaning they have a huge vested interest in keeping the region stable. But diplomatically, they maintain deep historical ties with Washington. This unique positioning allowed them to facilitate a back channel that really no one else could.
And the sources single out a very specific individual here, right?
They do. The Pakistani Army Chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir.
Right, because when a crisis is moving at the speed of social media, formal diplomatic cables that take days to draft and translate, they're useless.
Too slow. Way too slow.
You need military-to-military personal networks, and Munir had a direct line to Donald Trump.
He did. And the level of secrecy surrounding Munir's back channel is almost difficult to comprehend.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
The communications they were handling were so highly classified, so incredibly sensitive to the survival of the peace process, that Pakistani staff involved in the logistics were given a horrifying ultimatum.
Yeah, tell them about this.
Any leak of information regarding the talks would result in a mandatory life sentence in prison.
A life sentence, just for speaking to the press.
Yeah.
That tells you everything you need to know about the political fragility in both Washington and Tehran.
Oh, absolutely.
The mediators knew that if hardliners in either country caught wind of the specific compromises being discussed before the deal was actually signed, those hardliners would instantly sabotage the entire effort.
Exactly. The threat of a life sentence engineered this perfect, soundproof vault for these negotiations to happen. But, while Pakistan was running the primary secure line, Qatar was managing the financial and regional diplomacy.
Right, the Qataris from the runway.
Yes. And Qatar's involvement is just a fascinating study in modern geopolitical strategy, particularly when you look at what it actually cost them.
See, this is where I want to push on the narrative a bit. Because looking at the timeline, and specifically the European Parliament briefs, Qatar's role seems almost contradictory.
How so?
Well, the sources explicitly state that during the lead-up to these negotiations, direct Iranian missile strikes actually hit Qatar's own Ras Laffan energy infrastructure.
They did. They took significant physical damage.
Right. And most nations would declare war, or at least, sever ties, if their sovereign infrastructure was bombed. So why on earth would Qatar continue to host and mediate a peace deal for the exact country that just launched missiles at them?
That is the million-dollar question, or, the multi-billion-dollar question. And it's because Qatar practices a highly evolved form of smart power.
Smart power.
Right. The European Parliament policy brief breaks this down beautifully. Qatar is physically a very small state, but it is a liquefied natural gas, or LNG, superpower.
Oh, okay.
They use that massive wealth and their role as a neutral global mediator, as an impenetrable geopolitical shield.
So Qatar is basically treating geopolitics like a global banking system. They've made themselves too big to fail.
Exactly.
If Iran destroys the Ras Laffan facilities entirely, they don't just hurt Qatar. They crash the energy grid of half of Asia.
Which likely includes Iran's own critical trading partners, like China.
Wow. Okay, so that is the exact calculus. It's an insurance policy built entirely out of natural gas.
Precisely. Qatar understood that a wider regional war would be far more devastating to their long-term sovereign survival than swallowing the pride of a single missile strike.
That's a tough pill to swallow, though.
It is. But they took the hit, they temporarily reduced their LNG production, and they pushed forward with the mediation anyway. They even teamed up with Egypt and Turkey to exert immense diplomatic pressure on other Gulf states, effectively blocking them from joining the war against Iran.
And amazingly, All of that back-channeling, the threats of life imprisonment, the calculated absorption of missile strikes, it actually produced a document.
It did.
On June 17th, the world got the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, signed by President Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian.
And the terms of the MOU are just staggering in their ambition. It established a 60-day ceasefire, specifically designed to negotiate long-term nuclear constraints and mandate the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to get global commerce moving again.
Right. And the financial incentives attached to this are massive. I mean, the MOU potentially unfreezes $6 billion in Iranian assets that were being held in Qatar.
Yes.
But more than that, it dangles this astronomical carrot of $300 billion in pledged investments for Iran.
Though we do need to look really closely at that $300 billion figure.
Yeah, where's that coming from?
Well, the sources clearly note it is entirely unclear who would actually provide that funding.
Oh, of course.
This is a classic hallmark of modern diplomacy. Peace treaties are frequently built on what we call phantom economics.
Phantom economics. I like that.
Yeah, these massive unfunded financial promises that allow leaders to declare a monumental victory on state television today, knowing full well they won't have to explain where the actual money is a year from now.
Right. That phantom $300 billion pledge bought them a headline. But as we know, you cannot buy off a proxy war with a press release.
No, you definitely cannot.
Which is why the ink wasn't even dry on the Islamabad MOU before the entire framework slammed headfirst into the reality of Lebanon.
Yeah.
Because you simply cannot untangle the U.S.-Iran conflict without addressing the Israel-Hezbollah conflict. They are intrinsically linked.
They really are. Lebanon is the ultimate domino in this entire geopolitical structure. Throughout the secret negotiations, Iran maintained a hardline demand. A ceasefire in Lebanon had to be integrated into any deal with the U.S.
But tying a bilateral agreement to a deeply entrenched, multi-factional conflict like Lebanon, I mean, that creates a nearly unsolvable diplomatic puzzle.
It's a nightmare. But the diplomats tried to solve it by drafting the trilateral framework.
Right, the one signed on June 26th?
Yes, signed by the U.S., Israel, and the Lebanese government.
Mm-hmm.
And the tactical breakdown from Gensa outlines a 13-point plan here.
14 points.
Right. The main pillars are incredibly ambitious. It calls for the complete disarmament of Hezbollah, a gradual withdrawal of the Israel Defense Forces,
Wow.
the IDF from southern Lebanon, and the creation of 2 specific pilot zones.
Pilot zones.
Yeah, zones where the Lebanese armed forces are supposed to step in and assume full security control. The U.S. even threw in a pledge of $100 million in humanitarian aid to incentivize the Lebanese government to agree to these terms and begin rebuilding the infrastructure in the south.
Okay, but reading through this 14-point plan, the glaring flaw is just impossible to ignore.
Oh, it's huge.
The agreement is signed by Washington, Jerusalem, and Beirut. But do you know who isn't on the signatory page?
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah. I mean, signing a comprehensive peace deal for southern Lebanon without Hezbollah in the room, it's like signing a contract to sell a house, but entirely ignoring the heavily armed squatter currently living in the living room.
That's exactly what it's like.
The paperwork looks fantastic, but you can't actually move the furniture in.
The squatter analogy is highly accurate here because Hezbollah immediately demonstrated their veto power. Their leader, named Qasem, publicly and forcefully rejected the entire framework.
Surprising no one.
Right. He labeled the deal null and void, called it a disgrace, and framed it as a surrender of sovereignty.
I mean, from a strictly mechanical standpoint, you cannot implement a 14-point plan requiring the disarmament of a militant group if that group retains the military capacity and the political will to refuse.
Which begs the question, why do world-class diplomats spend weeks drafting and signing a 14-point framework that they know is fundamentally flawed the moment the ink dries?
Because fundamentally flawed agreements still serve a critical diplomatic function.
Really? Like what?
They create a legally recognized pretext for de-escalation. By establishing pilot zones and transition plans on paper, it gives the international community a framework to point to, a roadmap to try and enforce, rather than just staring into the abyss of endless unstructured war.
Ah, okay. But it also gives the military forces on the ground a legal justification for their ongoing actions.
Yeah. Because this framework heavily influences the Israeli stance. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has maintained a very clear position here. Despite the existence of this trilateral framework, the IDF retains full freedom of action.
Meaning they are not passively waiting to see if the Lebanese armed forces can successfully secure these theoretical pilot zones. If the IDF perceives a threat, they neutralize it immediately.
And the Jinsa reports confirm they are doing exactly that. Israel has been actively, systematically blowing up Hezbollah tunnel networks that are used to launch Iranian-supplied drones.
Right.
They've been launching targeted airstrikes on towns like Nabatea. Netanyahu's stated position is that while Israel has no territorial ambitions to occupy Lebanon, the IDF will absolutely not allow Hezbollah forces to reestablish themselves along the border areas.
And this complex web of regional dependencies, it perfectly explains the severe cognitive dissonance we are seeing right now. Nations have signed historic memorandums and trilateral frameworks that are supposed to end the war.
Right, on paper.
On paper. Yet the Gulf region continues to operate very much like a high-intensity combat zone.
So what does this all mean for the present moment? If we look at the tactical updates just from late June, specifically the window of June 26th to the 29th, the situation on the ground completely contradicts the peace treaties.
Oh, it's sheer chaos.
Iran launched approximately 22 drones and missiles in that brief window. They targeted locations in Kuwait, Bahrain, and they specifically went after commercial ships navigating the Strait of Hormuz, like the MT Kiku.
And the United States military responded forcefully to protect that commercial shipping lane. U.S. Central Command reported conducting targeted strikes against Iranian radar facilities, air defense systems, and the storage sites housing those attack drones.
So we have a globally recognized ceasefire, yet advanced militaries are actively trading missile strikes. The diplomatic posturing layered over this violence is just surreal.
It's bizarre.
Like, consider the public statements regarding negotiations. President Trump posts on Truth Social declaring that Iran has officially requested a meeting in Doha for June 30th, and that high-level U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are scheduled to attend.
But then the Iranian response is just a brick wall.
Right.
Almost immediately after that post, Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazim Garibabadi appears on Iranian state television and categorically denies the entire premise.
Just flat out denies it.
Flat out. He states publicly that absolutely no technical meetings or working groups are planned.
You know, for you listening to this, it's easy to view a canceled diplomatic meeting in Doha or a drone strike on a commercial vessel halfway across the world as abstract geopolitical noise.
Sure, it feels far away.
But the mechanics of this conflict have a direct daily impact on you. This specific lingering instability is exactly why global gas prices are experiencing massive volatility. It is why the entire global shipping industry is operating in a state of sustained panic.
Because when a commercial shipping company has to decide whether to send a billion-dollar cargo ship through the Strait of Hormuz, they aren't looking at the political press releases. They're looking at the insurance premiums and the tactical risk.
Exactly. To avoid being targeted by these ongoing drone strikes, massive commercial oil tankers are currently navigating the strait completely dark.
Which is terrifying.
They are intentionally deactivating their AIS transponders. Those are the systems that broadcast their location to the world so they cannot be tracked by hostile forces.
The logistics of that are just wow. You have these colossal vessels carrying millions of barrels of highly flammable crude oil, trying to navigate one of the narrowest, most heavily congested maritime choke points on the planet, completely blind to the outside world. They're sailing in the dark, hoping they don't collide with another vessel or strike a naval mine. And the friction this adds to the global supply chain translates directly into the price of goods and energy in your local economy.
So if the ships are sailing dark and the bombs are still dropping, this raises an important question. We have to look at the underlying motivation keeping this agreement afloat. Why hasn't either Washington or Tehran simply ripped up the June 17th MOU and walked away?
Because the MOU, despite all its flaws, is providing both leaderships with something they desperately need right now, a domestic victory narrative. The duct tape holding this entire ceasefire together is sheer political posturing.
So both leaders are using the agreement as a shield to claim economic success to their citizens.
Exactly.
Like Trump is actively taking credit for the price of oil stabilizing and dropping to $69 a barrel. Now, the PBS reporting provides an important fact check here, noting that he is falsely claiming the $69 figure is lower than the pre-war levels.
Right, which were actually hovering around $65 to $66 a barrel.
Exactly. But the political mechanism remains the same. He's utilizing the existence of the ceasefire to claim a massive economic win for the American consumer.
And Iranian President Pezeshkian is executing the exact same playbook in Tehran. He is loudly, consistently touting the impending arrival of that $6 billion in unfrozen assets from Qatar.
Right.
He is leveraging the MOU to convince the Iranian public that their economic suffering over the past few months has yielded a monumental financial victory, even as the Iranian military continues to launch drone strikes in the Gulf. Both administrations fundamentally require the optics of a functional deal to satisfy their domestic audiences, regardless of how violent the reality on the ground remains.
It is a profound realization that modern peace often exists primarily in the realm of press releases and public relations.
It really does.
Let's quickly recap the mechanics of the journey we've taken today. We started by examining the massive economic shockwave caused by the February assassination, which led Iran to choke off a fifth of the global oil supply.
Right.
We unpacked the logistical nightmare of establishing secret back channels, relying on Pakistani generals operating under the severe threat of life in prison just to get the two sides talking.
And we dissected Qatar's smart power strategy, utilizing their natural gas empire as a shield to continue mediating even while absorbing physical infrastructure damage from missiles.
We looked at the inherent flaws of the 14-point Lebanon framework, analyzing how a treaty signed by international powers can be paralyzed by the refusal of a single heavily armed group on the ground.
Yep.
And finally, we explored the surreal cognitive dissonance of our present day, where world leaders are loudly broadcasting historic peace agreements to their citizens while their respective militaries are actively destroying each other's radar sites and attacking commercial oil tankers.
It is the definition of a fragile peace, held together by mutual political necessity rather than mutual trust.
We really want to thank you for taking the time to join us on this deep dive. We know the news cycle can be overwhelming, and our goal is always to cut through the noise to arm you with the mechanical reality behind the headlines.
But before we sign off, there is one final critical piece of data buried in our sources that we haven't discussed yet, and it completely reframes how we should view the concept of a ceasefire. Yeah. While global attention
Next time.